brought to you by the test screening. We are gathered here today for the throwdown of the century in the cinematic universe, that is. In the left corner, we have Chloe Ireland, and in the right corner, we have Billy Parker. Our two esteemed hosts are going head-to-head in the throwdown to end all throwdowns. Well, at least for us personally, this might be a genre we're passionate about, romantic comedies. And I am ready for a battle. Chloe, are you ready?
I'm ready. I was born ready. The question is, are you ready? Because I don't think you're ready.
This is a genre I am passionate about, celebrating good, underrated, non-cheesy, well, maybe a little bit cheesy, picks.
Oh, 100% cheesy. Don't think we're getting away with this without cheese.
We at least need a certain degree of cheese, but yes, I am.
All cheese, all the cheese, all the time, every day.
I am.
Yes. I can't wait.
Prepared for war.
I have been eagerly awaiting this episode since we said we were going to do it. This is a full-on debate, a full-on battle of the rom-coms between myself and Billy. The rules are simple. We have picked our 3 favourite rom-coms and we must battle it out to discover which one goes in 3rd, 2nd and 1st place. So, first off, we need to chat a little bit about what our criteria has been for picking these rom-coms. What makes a good rom-com in our eyes? Why are we going to be defending these so passionately? Why are we so into these movies? Because, you know what? It's a mystery to me sometimes. But I'm going to throw it to you first. What makes a good rom-com, Billy?
Now.
And what are your picks?
Well, there's a couple key factors, but one, probably the foremost one that comes to mind for me is that tension. Now, I'm not just talking about romantic tension, because of course we always need a good chemistry in a romantic comedy, but there needs to be stakes. The rom-com follows such a set and sometimes predictable and cliche formula that a film really needs to do hard work to make me feel like these extremely hot people for a second aren't going to be okay. I need to know that, or I need to be questioning that. And then when the final conclusion, release, or, fist pump win of the couple finally getting together happens, it needs to feel earned so I can celebrate in my cinema seat.
That is, are the hot people going to be okay? The stakes have never been higher. I'm not a big fan of the rom-com genre. I'm going to put it out there straight away. It's not my favourite. Mostly because straight people, not going to lie. A lot of rom-coms are about a lot of straight people.
And straight people are annoying.
And straight people are, it does, you know what? You think you've knocked the nail on the head. Straight people do just annoy me, especially when they're being mushy and public about it, I am heterophobic, if you haven't quite, hinted that down. So my take, but then also, I was determined to try and get a queer rom-com on my list. But you know what? The queer rom-coms also shit. Really bad films. Somebody please prove me wrong, but I am yet to find an LGBT rom-com that has really done it for me.
No Bottoms, or does that not push the LGBTQ?
Bottoms isn't a rom. Okay. Listen, if Bottoms classes as a rom-com, I can have Princess Bride.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's not quite. There's some elements, but maybe it's not quite fully one.
So for me, the com is more important than the rom.
Indeed.
Because I am not invested in these straight people, particularly. But I like it when the story's good. I like it when the comedy feels authentic. I think authenticity is a really big thing for me. I like it when the comedy's relatable. I don't like it to be too out there, but I am going to completely disprove that with my number one pick, which is completely out there. But I don't know, it has to, even if it's completely fantastical, it has to be grounded in something honest for me that makes it funny. and the comedy has to hit. Otherwise, I'm completely disengaged and I do not care if they get together or not. So the stakes aren't that important. It can be low level for me. I don't really care, like, you know, if there isn't that much tension, you know, dramatically in the story. But it has to entertain me. The comedy has to be good, and I have to feel like, as a gay woman, there is something in this story that I can buy into, out of it. You know, there has to be something honest in the story that I can relate to, considering that it's quite removed from my personal experience.
Yeah, that sounds like that makes perfect sense to me, and almost for me linked in with that thing about grounding is theme is another key factor for me. Is considering, again, you know, it's not a favourite genre of mine personally, but I think the reason I said I was passionate about it earlier is because I think when they're good, they're really good and can be really, really heartfelt and optimistic and hopeful, and just really, you know, you come out of them with a spring in your step. But I think they can also, when the script and themes are intelligently developed enough, they can say some really interesting things and really engaging things about the way we interact as people. And considering it, they follow such a set model a lot of the time. And I think that's something I found when reviewing at least two of my picks, is that, you know, having an interesting and compelling message that maybe kind of subverts some stereotypes or viewpoints can really make or break a rom-com for me. If it feels too run-of-the-mill, even if it's funny, I don't care that much. But if, you know, it could be less funny, but also have something quite interesting to say. So that's kind of a criteria that went into my selections as well.
Should we talk a little bit about some honourable mentions that didn't make it into our picks before we duke it out and you inevitably leave?
The cockiness is coming out. Damn.
Fighting talk. I know how good my picks are. Okay, I feel like I have a good advantage already in this fight, but we'll see.
We shall see.
I have to be cocky because I know that your reviews are going to be way more elaborate than mine. Like, you're going to be able to argue the hell out of these, and all I'm going to basically say is these films are fucking good. So, you know, that's the level of fighting that I'm at. So I have to disarm you.
Yeah.
with whatever you tricks are up my sleeve.
But you've got an advantage because I think my picks are well known to a degree, but a little bit more niche because of, you know, my personal preferences and all that. Whereas, you know, I feel like people are maybe going to instinctively side with you some more so. You have that feather in your cap as well.
I'm appealing to the people.
You are indeed.
I appeal to the people. The people's voice on the podcast. Honourable picks, honourable mentions. I'm going to start us off. Bridget Jones. That was one that I was considering, didn't make it to the list. I have rewatched them so many times. The third one's trash, but the first two, decently entertaining. And it did answer the long overdue question of who would win in a fight between Colin Farrell and... Not Colin Farrell. What's his name? Colin Firth. Who would win in a fight between Colin Firth and Hugh Grant? And I think we all needed to know that was... and they do it twice.
That was the question the entire UK population needed to know. That was the answer they needed.
Exactly. And honestly, there is something relatable about Bridget Jones that I find really endearing, in that I know it's kind of coquettish and like twee in the way that she's like, you know, she's a woman, but she can't be like glamorous or smooth. And I'm like, I know that there's like, you know, some inherent issues with the way that Bridget Jones is portrayed. But as a young woman, I could relate to that more. You know, I was like, okay, I'm here for the awkwardness. I'm here for her inner voice and the way she kind of goes on a health kick and tries to turn her life around. And yeah, it's really entertaining. Not worthy of getting on the list, but decently entertaining. What would be one of your honourable mentions?
The Big Sick. I remember...
Oh, okay, yeah.
I remember...
Damn, he's winning already.
I remember seeing reviews about it coming out, and I think people who are kind of connoisseurs of rom-coms or watch a lot of movies know how good The Big Sick is. But I remember hearing kind of some under the radar, really positive reviews about it. And I watched it on a plane and I was so taken with it. And I think it's written by a real life married couple about their experience of being in an interracial relationship where there were tensions between the families. And one of them has a background in stand-up, as does the character, and as does the actor who plays him. And that means it's, the humor is really sharp, really sardonic, kind of cynical and very, very amusing. But also there's a lot of really great observational humor about, the differences between the cultures of the two sides of the family relationships. And it's kind of smart and innovative in that sense, in the rom-com genre, and how it's sort of delving into that and the tensions that arise from that. And it's also just that thing again that you said about authenticity, because it's written by the real life couple and it's essentially about themselves. It feels incredibly real and believable, organic. You totally believe in that pair and the chemistry between them, and it's really, really well cast. The actors bring their A game on that, and yeah, I was really, really invested in that central dynamic and was just compelled all the way through to see how that would get resolved.
Yeah, I do. I love that film. If that was one of your picks, I would have been scared. But the fact that you've thrown it away in one of your honourable mentions, I think that might have been a schoolboy error.
I am going out a little bit out on a limb with one of my picks. It's not a bad film, but it's not one that maybe everyone will necessarily take to. But we'll see.
Yes. Well, let's get to it then. Round 1.
Fight.
Ding ding ding. I'm gonna add some sound effects in to get us properly in the fighting spirit.
Placeholder bell.
So we're both going placeholder bell. Indeed. So we're both going to say what our third place picks are. We're gonna talk a little bit about them for a bit, get across our argument, and then we've got to decide between us which one takes the spot. And this could get ugly, because I'm not planning on backing down on any of my picks. I need to get this. Billy wins this podcast every day, okay, with the amount of work that he does. I feel like I need to have a
This is your moment in the sun. Your time to shine.
This is my moment in the sun, exactly. So, Billy, you know what? I'm going to do a little heads or tails, but if you go first, I've got a coin on me. So, heads or tails, Billy?
Give me a tails.
And do you want to go first? Heads, tails, and is that for going first?
Yes.
Yes, okay. It's a heads.
Ooh. Starting off strong, Chloe. All right, let's go.
Yeah. Damn, okay. So, my pick for third place is 4 Weddings and a Funeral. I've picked this because it's a classic. But there's also loads of other things that I like about it. I actually rewatched it before doing this episode, and every time I rewatch it, it gives me joy. It gives me something else to enjoy about it. The film is about Hugh Grant's character, who, within his group of friends, ends up going to a lot of weddings. It's just that time of year. Everyone seems to be getting married, sometimes within 3 months of meeting each other, and he's kind of down because, well, all of his friends are getting married. He seems to be the odd one out. He's living with his friend, who also has some relationship problems of her own, and between them they keep on going to these weddings, and he keeps on bumping into this mysterious and very sexy American lady who he has an affair with, and over the course of the weddings that follow, their relationship develops, and he also discovers that somebody else might have feelings for him within the friendship group. So things that I really like about this film. First of all, Hugh Grant. I'm not the biggest Hugh Grant fan in the world, but I love him in this. And I think if this could be the quintessential Hugh Grant rom-com performance, it would be this. Because his bumbling, like idiot British person act just works. It just works. I found it really charming and endearing in a way that it irks me in other films. In this film, it kind of works for me. And I think that's also because of the sheer amount of sarcasm that happens throughout the film. Like, all of the characters are so quick and witty. This brings me on to probably my top point for the film, which is the ensemble of this film is incredible. Rowan Atkinson plays a trainee priest, and it is glorious. There are so many just little bits within it that I just found... I still laugh at them today. I love the fact that we've got some representation with the deaf character. There are gay characters in it. I know they're not explicitly stated to be gay characters, but come on. I think for the time, it's really progressive. And I love this. Really, it's a film about a group of friends and how their dynamic changes when some of them start getting married. And I think it's also got that melancholia to it. You know from just seeing the title that there's going to be a funeral near the end of the film. And I do think that sad moment really hits with lots of pathos. There's a particular scene at the funeral where the partner of the dead character does a speech, and it is really emotional. It's actually a really beautiful moment in the film. So I think for multiple reasons, I really enjoy it. I enjoy the ensemble cast. I enjoy Hugh Grant's central performance. I think the central relationship is really well done and also just funny within itself. That whole scene in the rain where she's like, "It's raining, I hadn't even noticed," like that cracks me up every single time. So yeah, I love this film. I think it's a really fun time, very rewatchable, and I would recommend it when somebody asks me to recommend a rom-com. I think it is quintessential British rom-com, and that's why it's my pick. Your turn, Billy.
Well, just a quick point on Four Weddings. I think it is a very, very strong pick. Surprised it made third. I thought it would get higher, to be honest, on your three. But I think that it's a theme I'll return to later as well, that idea of the melancholia and the sadness really then accentuating and causing the more uplifting and brighter parts of the story to then blossom. A key thing that impacts Four Weddings for me is that whilst the ensemble, like you said, is terrific, they're all excellent together and you really believe in the chemistry between those guys as a friendship unit, it's the central relationship, man. It's the shiteness that is Andy McDowell really impacts that for me. I don't care what anyone says. She is... Sean Young and Andy McDowell come from the same school of, tree acting, which is to say entirely made of wood. And I just, that rain I hadn't noticed line at the end, people often say it as one of the worst lines in cinema. It's a fine line on its own because it's kind of sarcastic and funny, or at least that's what the intended effect seems to be. But she just delivers it so, she makes such a pig ear of that line, and it's just...
I thought that the way she says it makes it funnier, because it's almost as if she doesn't care. Which, it's like, "Oh, it's raining? I hadn't even noticed."
Oh, see, see, I think it's just stilted beyond belief, and no one can tell me otherwise. I'm sorry. That line, her line delivery is... I don't think I've ever heard a line delivered more flatly and more just clunkily in a film ever than Andy McDowell in that scene. And
Agree to disagree. It's iconic for a reason, Billy.
Well, I'll stop ranting about Andy McDowell's woodenness and move on to my pick. So this is the one I'm going slightly out on a limb on, because it's not one that a lot of people necessarily know or necessarily think is amazing. But I think it's special for a number of reasons. And that is Cameron Crowe's 1989 coming-of-age romantic comedy, Say Anything. This has been a personal favourite of mine for a lot of years. And it's essentially about I don't want to use the term slacker because I feel like that's reductive, but a slightly underachieving, not particularly academically gifted teenager, played by John Cusack, who ends up falling for and he is very socially well liked. He then falls in love with and is kind of friendly, innocently pursuing a very academically gifted girl who is also kind of on the periphery, on the outside of things socially, because she has the academic gifts in spades, but is kind of finds it a little bit awkward and a little bit difficult to fit in with everyone else, who obviously is like a lot more colloquial in their everyday behaviour. And the reason I love this is because, given that romantic comedies are so entrenched in an established framework for character archetypes, it always brings me like the greatest of pleasure when one manages to upend those expectations and add complexity to those proceedings that in other hands would just be trite and predictable and kind of just follow the rule book to a T. It's actually interesting to think about Say Anything coming out, only 4 years after The Breakfast Club, because as amazing as The Breakfast Club is, you look back at that and see how certain viewpoints and attitudes in that are very outdated, whereas this manages to subvert so many high school and rom-com stereotypes that I feel like it does present really dynamic relationships that some of the stock characters in rom-coms just don't have. And the protagonist, he has two intuitive, outspoken, robust, and completely platonic female friends. They jab at him but offer him advice in the interest of him not getting hurt romantically. John Cusack, again, not particularly smart in an academic sense, but he's not an uncaring lout who has to be softened by a girl and taught to find a heart. He already has one. He's really courteous and gentlemanly, and he's supporting his sister in earlier scenes, and playing with his nephew and sort of splitting the time there. And he's just a really earnest character, which is not a really nice subversion of the standard jock that's normally has to be taught a lesson by the prospective girlfriend in this type of story. And then Sky, or at least the actor playing her, I think the character's name escapes me, but she's very scholarly, but she isn't, a caustic social climate. She struggles to fit in with the more colloquial population of the high school. But she's also, not defined by her brain. She has a personality of her own. And John Cusack is able to bring her into that world, which she's, accepted into and welcomed with mostly open arms, but instill an emotional confidence in her. But she gives him more career and life drive. And I just love that sense of a really even-handed relationship in terms of what they bring to each other. And it's not the funniest romantic comedy in the world. There is some kind of light, breezy, verbal jesting. That's very nice. Although there is a really great gag around, keys being protected and not handed out to drunk drivers at a party. That's quite inspired. And, cool. The friends are all fun, loving and encouraging of each other. Call me sentimental, but I just love how earnestly and generously this film views young people and kind of rejects this binary view of social cliques and has a more diverse and optimistic attitude towards those people. Intelligence, background and academic prospects don't factor into the viability of a relationship. And at least, not in the case of this. And an academic person can fall for a non-academic person, and they can bring things to each other and nurture each other in equal measure. And that's what I really love about it. It brings me a lot of joy in that sense. It's also worth mentioning that Say Anything houses the famous In Your Eyes Peter Gabriel boombox scene that has been referenced in so much. Maeve references it in Sex Education. So it's kind of passed, and it's been referenced in Deadpool 2. It's passed into the cinematic mythos. And it feels genuinely heartfelt. It's not the least bit cringeworthy because of everything that's been set out before. So, even the smallest parts are written with, justified compassion. And it really warms my heart for those reasons. What do you have to say to that?
You know what? Good fighting talk. And I appreciate that the boombox image has become iconic. Maybe even more iconic than I didn't even know it was raining when I was sucking Hugh Grant's face off. So that's tricky because, listen, for me, a rom-com, it has to have the rom and the com. And I feel like we've both got opposite ends of that spectrum. Because I feel like you got the rom, but I got the com.
I think that has that has happened here.
That is what's happened. You know what? I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to give you this one just because I agree that the actual romantic plot of Four Weddings is probably the least interesting thing about the film. But I hold dear the rest of it. Everything else going around them is iconic and just perfect to me for a rom-com film. But I will let you have this one just because it's actually got a decent romance plot in it.
I am very pleased that because this was my underdog, so I am really, really chuffed that I got round one, and I think just in general more people should know about and love and appreciate and watch Say Anything. So round one, number 3.
There we go. Okay, so our third place, Say Anything. So our second place choices, I'm going to be going again this time, and this is going to be a tough one for you. Because you're going to be fighting against one of your favourite films of last year. My pick for second place is Rye Lane. I got to it before you did. I was just saying before, Billy probably would have gone for this if he hadn't already spoken about it so much on the podcast. So I snatched it straight out of his
You were
hands.
brutal. You just took no prisoners.
I was. No, I'm not taking any prisoners because you know what? I know that you love this film, but I love this film too. And I didn't get to talk about it that much when we reviewed it because I hadn't seen it when we reviewed it. But now I have. And I love this film. This is probably one of my favourite films of the last, 5 years or so. And definitely one of my favourite rom-coms. We've spoken about it so much on the podcast that I'm not sure I'm going to bore everybody with the plot. But what I really do like about it is the chemistry between the central pair. They go on this kind of almost like a scavenger hunt around London, and in the process kind of explore their relation to relationships and then with each other. They've both been burnt in the past and they both react to it in different ways, different conflicting ways, and they have to kind of get through that hurdle together. Rye Lane has got such a unique visual style, which I adore. I don't think I've seen a film that looks like this ever. It has a really distinct style. It's so colourful, which really matches the kind of colourful performances of the actors. But I never don't believe them, not for a second, even though everything in this world is heightened. You get a lot of these brilliant flashbacks, or not even flashbacks because they didn't really happen, but these kind of fantasy scenes about how they met, about all these lies that they're making up about each other. You get these wonderful scenes, but it's not. But it never feels too fantastical. I always believe everything that they say. The comedy is great. There are some absolutely banging one-liners in this. It's very quotable, and yeah. Also, there's a Colin Firth cameo. That guy gets around.
Love Guactually.
Which I adore.
The chilly place.
Love Guactually. Incredible. Yes. You know what? I don't think I need to argue my case that much. I think you know how good this film is. I think you know you're in trouble.
I am in trouble, but
You're in real trouble.
I'm gonna do my best. If you're done, that is.
Yeah. I'm done.
Okay, so
Mic drop.
And I believe there is an actual mic drop in Rye Lane, so that feels very fitting. Yes, I do adore that film, but I have to argue my case. I have to not fall to my bias. And I went back several decades for this one, even further than Say Anything. We're going way back to classic Hollywood for this one. His Girl Friday, which is based on a stage play and around the sort of the trappings of the American journalism scene, and essentially follows a recently divorced couple who worked together as sort of partners in journalism in the fast-paced world of reporting news, and sort of the breakneck pace of that work. And she comes back because she has to sort of have one last final sort of conversation with him to tie things up with her. And she brings her new husband along the way. But then there is a sort of a criminal case going on at the moment that suddenly bursts into fruition and sort of pulls them back into that intensely burning, riveting, multitasking reporting strain that they are so experienced and previously embedded in. And it sort of reignites old romantic tensions, and they almost battle out like we are from there in a sort of a game of wits as to, is it a conflict or is it a cooperation, the reporting of this story? And, it's in black and white. It's sort of confined settings. It's not got a tremendous amount to necessarily write home about in a cinematography sense, but what sort of, due to its sort of stage play thematic sort of framework and makeup and construction, it essentially lives and dies on the strength of the script. And I can't quite stress enough just how finely crafted the dialogue in this film is. It's so sharp. It's like, those special Japanese Damascus steel knives. It makes those look like a cashmere blanket. It's so pointed and precise. The dialogue exchanges are almost choreographed like a dance. The responses are never robotic, but they're so perfectly timed and placed that these kind of verbal tennis matches just are total fireworks to watch on screen. And there are passing, almost throwaway lines and gestures dashed off partway through conversations that are funnier than the main gags in most modern comedies. It's really a sight to behold in terms of, relaying rapid fire dialogue. And, the pace is lightning fast, but the stable and measured mid shots, comfortably frame most scenes in such an expert manner where it's, despite the blistering pace of some of these dialogue scenes and how quickly, the blocking moves around. So there's, 7-8 person populated rooms and sequences. It never feels overly theatrical or robotic. It's, again, that balletic dance-like choreography. We keep a really good handle on the plot threads, and the narrative is still really easy to follow. And the cast carry it off with total ease. It's all relayed so smoothly, and the dialogue also really efficiently moves forward the plot and drives it forward with a lot of focus. And there are kind of aspects of the plot construction that work wonders, I think, for the romance-centered comedy that is the center of the film. The wider plot of the man on death row and the journalistic characters working tirelessly to investigate it and thwart the execution of an innocent man. It gives proceedings a really excellent sense of urgency, and it creates a really genius farcical series of events that are connected on a very tight causal chain, and it kind of pushes that central trio, Cary Grant and his character's ex-wife and her new husband, into these kind of really funny situations that create generally believable friction, and they kind of have to work together in cases and kind of utilize each other's individual strengths to solve the chaos they find themselves in. And then that the two sides of the screenplay constantly intertwining and feeding off each other, and it does a great job of using that to believably reignite old tensions. Using the criminal hijinks to accentuate the comedy. It's kind of it to compare it to Rye Lane. It almost feels like a feature length expansion of that scene in Rye Lane where Dom and Yaz meet up with Dom's ex and the guy she cheated on him with.
I was just going to say that. I was getting similar vibes to both of them involve crime.
Yes. So I also, just one final little point. I love how much of the action is driven in and initiated by the very commanding female lead, Rosalind Russell. I think it's some of the most agency and authority I've seen from a female character on screen in a romantic comedy ever. So that's really great to see that she has that much of an influence on the movement of the plot. And so, yeah, it's a tough one, but that's my case for His Girl Friday.
I think I see your point, sir. But I will raise you the simplicity of the plot of Rye Lane and just how perfectly it's executed. They don't go... It's a very simple kind of A to B kind of plot with little diversions in between. Not reinventing the wheel. But what they do within that format, they allow the characters and the relationship between them to really thrive and blossom, and the chemistry between the two actors, the two leads, is so good that you're fully along for the ride. There's also, there's crime in this one too. There's plenty of crime to go around, and I enjoyed how much this speaks to a modern romance. We haven't had a lot of good modern rom-coms that includes, talking about Tinder dates, talking about modern dating and making connections in the modern world. And I think Rye Lane really nails that on the head with how these two interact with each other.
Absolutely. I think one thing that Rye Lane has that His Girl Friday doesn't have is really great tonal variation. His Girl Friday kind of starts at this one fever pitch and sort of just barrels through. And that is very gratifying in its own sense. But, it's not got a tremendous amount of range. Rye Lane has that space, but has moments of, introspection, pensiveness, really wild, screwball slapstick gags and really riotously funny sequences of just verbal sparring, and also just moments where the sadness of how they've been burnt in relationships really hits, and you really feel. And again, that thing about wanting these characters to be okay, and also feeling like they are kind of walking this tightrope act of potentially not ending up together, and also maybe not succeeding in their dreams and their career prospects. And I think that combined with everything you said previously about the performances, the structure of it, it's airtight at 77 minutes. Like, it's the perfect length. Every time I watch it, I'm just like, wow, that really just it's the complete package. And the visual style that you mentioned earlier, it's just a great all-rounder. As much as I love His Girl Friday, I think, you made a great case for Rye Lane. I think you take this one.
Yes! Victory for second place is mine. And this winning streak's going to continue.
Oh, we shall see.
For first place.
Because we've got two titans going against each other.
We have got two absolute titans, and I think they're very different as well.
Final round.
I actually, just so that I could take you down systematically, point by point, I watched The Apartment for this. I sat through those 2 hours, 2 and a bit hours.
I'm not liking the way you're saying this. I feel like you're going to turn around and completely tear it down. Oh, no.
But you've got the advantage of me going first.
Okay.
So you can listen to what I've got to say, and then you can tear me down, and then I'm going to read your first place pick for filth. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Go for it. I'm very interested to hear what you have to say. And you've also got an absolutely barnstorming number one pick as well, which does not make things easier.
Thank you. Thank you. So my number one pick is Emily. Probably one of my favourite films ever, not just in the rom-com genre, but just in general. Again, it's a film with a really unique visual style. There isn't really another film that feels like it. And similar to Four Weddings, actually, although there is a definite romantic plot to it, and I would actually make an argument that the film itself is a romantic film, even though the romance plot is only a small section of the main film. It's also got some incredibly funny moments in it as well. I'd akin this film to a curious child trying to figure out life for the first time, and when you're a young person and you watch this film, it gets so many things right. So many of the little questions that we ask ourselves, so many of the little details in life that we might miss are explored so beautifully within this film. From the soundtrack, which is just gorgeous, to the cinematography, to the acting. The acting in this film is fantastic. The comedy hits every time. The slower moments and the pathos also hit every time. And the central romance, you know what? I was rooting for these straight people, Billy. I was rooting for them. There's something so inherently charming about the lengths that these two go to, like, woo each other, to romance each other. These little, like, breadcrumbs that they are sprinkling throughout the plot to lead each other to the conclusion of them, either getting together or not getting together. It is so wonderfully done. It's whimsical. It's a whimsical film, but it's also just it's got some moments in it that are just really not shocking but surprising in a fantastic way. It has a bit of an edge to it that you're not expecting from a film that looks and sounds like this. It's got a bit of a naughty side to it, which I really appreciated, because that just ticks it over the edge for me into something that is relatable, is grounded in all the right ways, while also being romantic and ethereal in all of the right ways. Also, I've never known another rom-com to have so many scenes involving a garden gnome, and I think that should be celebrated, personally.
It should.
So yeah, I could go on about this film, but it's one of my favourites. I see it as a bit of a coming-of-age film. It's definitely a romantic comedy. And it also just kind of stands on its own as its own beautiful little thing. So, yeah, what have you got to say to that, Billy?
I think you hit the nail on the head in lots of respects. I love that really kind of, there's some of those raunchy montages and kind of the almost kind of anarchic, mischievous energy that Audrey Tauto's character has in Amelie. So that makes it immensely pleasurable and fun to watch. And I think, but like you said, it has a real soulful heart to it in amongst the whimsy that kind of grounds it in amongst kind of the heightenedness of the reality. There are like the scenes where it's been a while since I've seen it, the subplot about the father kind of reconnecting with a family member through the letters, that really hits. And also where that very funny scene where she sets up the pair who are kind of, I think, a bit burnt out romantically and maybe aren't necessarily like the classically attractive pairing, and she's able to manipulate events in such a way where they're able to like really capitalize on their feelings for each other in a very fun and public fashion, which is very, very funny. I think there's just kind of, I guess thematically, it reminds me of Say Anything in that sense of just the goodness in people and the taking the opportunity to make people feel special and seen, and to push that love and adoration in a platonic and romantic sense whenever possible. And I think it does that through kind of, again, smart observations about the awkwardness that we as humans encounter in our everyday interaction, and it gives it a real sense of magic as well. Yeah, I love Amelie. I can't really say enough good things about it.
Billy, did you forget that this was meant to be a fight?
Oh, but
Was my pick so good that you ended up arguing?
No, because you haven't
for me.
My argument is passionate for The Apartment.
Okay, well here we go. You've got to give it to me about why The Apartment is your number one pick.
So, for those who don't know, made around 1960, Billy Wilder romantic comedy focusing on Jack Lemmon, who is trying to climb the social ladder in a very sort of oppressive corporate company setting, and uses his apartment as sort of a bargaining tool to sort of get in the favour of some execs so they can promote him within the business. And, it's there's a certain method to his social climbing, but also real sadness and loneliness that come within that. And through that, he kind of meets and sparks up a connection with a kindred spirit in Shirley MacLaine. And there are, again, elements of farce, elements of screwball, but real deep sadness at times that, again, makes the more buoyant section of the film soar so amazingly. And for me, I think one of the greatest feats that a romantic comedy or a movie in any genre really can achieve is to create a satisfying deconstruction of an aspect of a system in our society, which can be satisfying in a vacuum, but that deconstruction then kind of acts as a mirror image to the personal struggles of a smaller player in that ever-growing ladder, kind of an undervalued cog in the machine, oppressed by the organisation, a protagonist, in this case, struggling to be autonomous in a world that manipulates and reaps the benefits of his unwavering dedication. And, you know, in the apartment, we see the structure of a Hollywood caper and romantically comedic farce, kind of managing to encapsulate a universal emotional struggle and yearning we all go through. And, you know, there are scenes in it that are just totally ridiculous and just buoyantly laugh out loud funny. Like, there's a scene where Jack Lemmon strains spaghetti through a tennis racket. That is just a genius moment of physical comedy. And Jack Lemmon just being so, like, his conviction in how he feels that is totally a completely solid way of cooking just gets me every time. But it's, you know, when I watch The Apartment, it's hard for me to not see it as one of the most successful examples of balancing social comment and universal empathetic counter interaction with light-hearted, breezy comedy that I've ever seen on screen. And I think it's perhaps cinema's greatest ever tightrope act between comedy and human drama. And it's really well directed in, you know, Billy Wilder was a total wizard with the camera, and his use of widescreen and the vast lensing of the expansive kind of cavernous office spaces kind of filled to the brim with endless identical boxed-in company workers. It shows the loneliness of that establishment. But then there's like this wonderful touch of environmentally contrasting storytelling where Jack Lemmon's C.C. Baxter, he lives in this apartment, which is kind of a sanctuary from the manipulatory workplace, but it's also kind of, it's lonely. It's empty in a sense. It's kind of a temple of his solitude, and he yearns for companionship. And that's, and again, clever bit of storytelling, you know, the workers sort of invade that space as well. They're sort of vultures exploiting his goodwill. And, you know, I struggle to think of a film that so impeccably balances sprightly, humorous jesting and this deeply somber, dramatic edge. And, you know, the cinematography has such a stark and serenely beautiful quality to it. It's got just, it tinges proceedings with just the right sense of, the right sized cloud of sorrow, like kind of hanging over the narrative. And Shirley MacLaine and Jack Lemmon, you know, what an on-screen pairing. Some of the most effortless chemistry I've ever seen between, you know, a pair of two romantic leads. And I just love the fact that their eventual connection is born out of care and support that comes from, you know, a very sort of tragic and very serious event that happens halfway through the film. And I just love the fact that it's given real space in the runtime to grow out of him very diligently caring for her and being genuinely compassionate and selfless, at least to my eye. But then, you know, there's complexity in his character as well, because he is kind of, you know, being manipulatory in his own sense in the workplace with how he's kind of using his apartment as social currency. And I, you know, those two as a pairing on screen, you know, carrying off the shifts between flirting and the more serious peaks in drama with total mastery. And yeah, there's the organicness of their connection, and it totally hits on that will they, won't they tension as we careen towards the conclusion. I still kind of wonder as we get towards those final stretches, you know, I hadn't seen it in a while, but it made me go when I rewatched it and like, oh, do they get together again? It kind of, it had me in slight disbelief, which is great. You know, I kind of think it speaks to the film's ability to wrong foot the expectations of the audience in, you know, this immaculate structure and sense of pacing. You know, I think we're given enough time to invest in and be drawn into the characters' circumstances before the film wrongfoots us, but it does so early enough that it's able to progress into intriguing complications for these characters' plights without anything feeling rushed or dashed off hastily. It moves fast enough to keep the story comfortably moving and keep things pensive and dramatic in just the right moments, but also straightforwardly entertaining. There are setups involving kind of objects and I want to say well, not really coincidences, but more sort of lining ups of people hitting certain locations, and they're set up early enough that they set in motion series of events that are paid off in immensely satisfying and logical fashion for the plot. And in the end, I don't think I've ever seen a romantic comedy that had such a deeply somber heart, but I think that is what makes it. It makes the funny moments and the moments of hope, that really, really sing. It's got the euphoric and the despondent. It understands that through tender interplay between two lost souls, and having a warmly enveloping, passionate score and measured injections of irreverence and also kind of tension that feels almost inflected from that of a noir film, every thread is then allowed to blossom to the fullest effect. And it's a viewing experience amongst any really in cinema that I find difficult to pick apart and find fault with, which is why I am very intrigued to hear your counter arguments to this.
Well, listen, it's really hard to argue against you when you're so goddamn good at putting your point across. And listen, I didn't dislike this film at all. I really didn't. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. I think my gripes with it, or why I wouldn't really rate it, is mainly just I didn't really laugh out loud at it. There were moments that I found were funny, but I found most of the time it was like a little bit of one of those like nose breathing through the nose, like, huh. And that was kind of as far as it goes. But I think that's just maybe my sense of humour. Humour's subjective. And I thought it was clever, and I thought the setup's really good, and I thought that the acting and the comedy and the acting was really good. But it just didn't tickle my funny bone in the same way that maybe it tickled yours. I enjoyed it as a film. I just didn't really enjoy it as much as a rom-com. And the screenplay's great, but it's also long. It's a long film. And sustained for that amount of time, bearing into account that the rom-com is not my favourite genre. And as likeable as these two people are, there were moments where I could feel the time. I could really feel the time passing. I think that's maybe down to some of the more melancholy elements of it, which I do understand why these are a plus. I understand from like a filmmaking perspective. I like the fact that there's a rom-com out there. There should be more rom-coms, to be honest, that deal with themes of loneliness. I think that there isn't enough of that, and I think that's something that everybody can relate to, either the beginnings or the ends of a relationship, or sometimes even during. I think loneliness and need for connection is a theme that we could explore more in this genre. But I don't know, it's just one of those films where I enjoyed it, but the two ends didn't hit as hard as I wanted it to. I wasn't as invested in the romance as you were. I wasn't laughing at the comedy in the same way as you were. And I think without those things really hitting, those 2 hours do feel like quite a long 2 hours to get through. That being said, I think I would recommend this film to people. I really would. Like, if someone has asked me for a rom-com, I would recommend this to them. The cinematography is gorgeous. I loved the way it's set out. I loved even just the idea of the plot is genius, to be honest. Like the script is really, really good. This is the second time actually that Sex Education has referenced something, because they also reference the apartment with Maeve renting out the caravan to couples.
Oh yeah,
during the first season, which I was reminded of when watching this. So there's, if anything, that's just more points to Sex Education for me. I think, yeah, maybe it's just my sensibilities of like, I'm not as into watching older films as you are, and I think therefore these, older films are not going to hit for me the same way that they hit for you if you're not really invested, or if you haven't prepared yourself for this kind of film going in, it's not going to hit the same. Does that make any sense?
No, that makes perfect sense, and I totally hear you. Like, I think of the films we've talked about today, it's of the six, it's one of the less funny ones. And even though there are bits in it, like the tennis racket gag, that I do find very, very amusing, overall, it's not an immensely comedic film. A lot of the humour is quite gentle, but I guess it comes down really to what we clearly value slightly different things in romantic comedies, which is great. You know, everybody takes and values different things in different genres, and you know, that shapes our preferences, doesn't it? And I guess
this film did make me care about the straight people. I will put that out there. It did make me care about the straight people, so it gets points for that. And it does get points for that.
Yeah. Again, it's not necessarily. I do like the humour in it, but it's not necessarily the real making of it for me. It is that balance between the lighthearted and the dark, which again I think it absolutely nails and doesn't, for me, put a foot wrong with, really. And I just think that really earnest chemistry between the two leads makes up for a lot of maybe the comedy not necessarily being riotous and being, you know, hysterical, being on the softer side, the gentle side. But I have to disagree about the pacing. I know it's at times
it's over 2 hours.
I know, but for me, I think for that length, it doesn't feel long to me. It really, really doesn't. It just, I think I don't know, man. I maybe it was just my state watching it as well. You know, I was quite tired, I think. But there were moments where it took a bit of doing. It took a bit of doing to keep it on and you know, get through it. And not because I wasn't enjoying the moments. I think it was just the length and the way that these scenes play out, where it just holds a little bit too long for scenes that I'm like, this scene needs to be over. You know, it needs to be snappier. But that's a very modern sense. Like that's a very modern filmmaking thing. That's like, you know, that's the Gen Z in me ruining what could otherwise be a very pleasant experience. But I really did feel the length of this one, unfortunately. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it's peaks and valleys in tension and atmosphere and tone is very balanced. You know, I genuinely looked sort of at the time at one point, just glanced, and we were like an hour and 25 minutes in. I was like, wow, it feels like 40 minutes have passed. And that's my genuine feeling. Like it, you know, certain films just fly by, and this one just happens to for me. Fair enough. You know, we're running at two different clocks, clearly. But I get it. I do understand why you like this one so much. It just wasn't. It would make my top 5, Billy. It really would. It just wouldn't make my number 1. Fair dues. So you have at least introduced me to a very good rom-com, and I thank you for that. But I'm Team Amelie all the way. And now we have to decide. It's the moment of truth, Billy. Who are we going to pick? I mean, I am so Team Apartment, and I do really want it to win. But it's hard, isn't it? Because I'm this. Amelie's a fantastic film. But the romance bit of it, it's not the main plot. It does come late in the day, but I do think, you know, the kind of the general feeling of love, sort of just a feeling of general love for humankind, just sort of pervades tonally a lot of the rest of the film. That's what I mean. It's a romantic film, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Does a romantic comedy have to be about a couple, or can it be a romantically comical film? Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people she sets up, you know, that's, you know, that's even before we get to, you know, her own prospective relationship. And I think that The Apartment is a very, very well loved film, but I feel like Amelie is more instantaneously vibrant and easy to get into and enjoyable. I think, you know, The Apartment is your thinking man's or woman's romantic comedy, and it's the pacing may not necessarily be for everyone in this case. So I think if I could happily give it to Amelie if we're going on the metric of accessibility, mainstream viability, appealing to the most wide demographic of people, while also just being really genuinely well written, thought provoking, laugh out loud funny, and also just having interesting things to say, but also done serviced with great editing, really visually eye popping filmmaking, and again, just a really buoyant personality.
Way to deliver a backhanded victory, Billy, by saying that this is not the thinking person's
No,
film.
it's not. It wasn't intended to be backhanded at all.
Yes. The Apartment is the thinking man's rom-com, while as Emily is more for the common folk, you know,
No,
the normal people.
I say thinking man's rom-com in an observation of construction rather than necessarily like.
Listen, I mean, do you want a spade to dig yourself deeper into the hole that you've just created for yourself? That's
not a massive hole.
I'm taking the victory. I'm just challenging the way you worded it.
Yes, perhaps I didn't word it in the most thoughtful manner, but maybe the right turn of phrase would be it's a more meditative and introspective romantic comedy, which will be to a particular taste, but perhaps not as far-reaching as Amelie. That feels like a better way to put it.
Maybe that is a better way of saying it. Yeah, I think I approve more with that one. I don't think it's not the most accessible film in the world. Again, it's really dependent on taste, and I actually think that both of the films that we've chosen are very stylized, or they are quite niche. I can see some people watching Amelie and absolutely hating it, just because of it. It's almost Wes Anderson-esque quirkiness to it that might not hit right for people. But for me, it all works perfectly. But I can see it not doing that for others. And I think for The Apartment as well, like if that is your kind of film, you're going to absolutely adore it. But if it's not, like it's not quite mine, then you're not going to get out of it what you're intended to get out of it, or you're not going to be left with the feeling that you're meant to be left feeling with, even though the script is really good and the acting is really good and everything is as it should be, even if it is 2 hours long. So I'm not letting that go. It was a long time, Billy. But you know what? You've given me the victory, and I'm going to take that.
Yeah, I don't think
wholeheartedly. Thank you.
I don't think we were. I can let Amelie supersede. I think I don't think either of us were letting our top picks go, and I do think the point about pacing and The Apartment not being for everyone is a mark against it in this battle. I do think Amelie having widespread appeal and just generally being its greatness being more on the surface and more agreeable is a really positive characteristic of it.
Knockout.
Nice. Well, I'm taking the trophy. I'm gonna print myself out a little trophy to hang it above my bed, just to remind myself of this victory.
That you beat me.
Yes, I beat Billy at something film related. Woohoo! This has never happened. This will never happen again. I can tell you now. I feel like you're letting me have this one easy, just so that next time that we do one of these, you can absolutely smack down with some choices.
Hey,
I want to do this again. I've enjoyed this immensely.
I've enjoyed this immensely too. It's a different thing for us, kind of going head to head, but I have thoroughly enjoyed it. And hey, if we do a horror one, you are in.
Oh, okay.
You are going to have
to be fair, if we do a horror one, I'm going to have to do some homework. Yeah.
I did my dissertation on horror films.
If we do,
you're gonna.
Oh God.
You've got an uphill battle on that one.
Right. Halloween. How many months is that away? I've got time.
A full 6 months. Full 6 months of prep. 8 months.
You won't know what hit you by the end of 6 months. I'm going to find some amazing horror films.
Oh.
All right, and that is the end of that. Victory to Amelie. So the list is in first place Amelie, in second place Rylane, And the third one is, oh my God, yours.
Say anything.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Let me do that bit again. Say anything. I'm too wrapped up in my victory to even remember what films you picked now. So that's it for this battle. In first place, we have Emily. In second place, we have Rylane. And in third place, we have Say Anything. But there were some good arguments throughout. I don't think that truly reflects how detailed Billy's arguments were. And to be honest, if this was a high school debate, you would have won hands down. Let's be real. But I'm taking it. I'm taking the victory.
Savor your victory.
Next time, I think next time, the training wheels will be off, and Billy will be taking no prisoners.
They will be.
Watch out for that when we go head to head once more. If you'd enjoyed it today, please let us know on Instagram, TikTok, or we're even on YouTube now. Go find us on YouTube, leave us some comments, let us know if you agree with how this fight of the ages played out. We would love to know your thoughts. And we will see you next week. We're back to normal review format next week. What have we got coming up, Billy?
So next week we have the Academy Award heavyweight historical drama, The Zone of Interest. Another film that got a lot of awards buzz, but was snubbed at the last minute. Wrestling brotherly biopic, The Iron Claw. Matthew Vaughan's new satirical, extravagant spy caper comedy, Argyle. And the new Bob Marley biopic, Bob Marley, One Love.
Nice. Well, we've got plenty to look forward to then, and we will see you next week on the test screening. Bye.
Bye.